So let's get into the issue of Cuban politics, my friend. So what do you think that is going on with here with Obama and all the things that are going on with this issue? Yes, you can talk.
No, I think it's a positive issue. To be honest with you, like I understand that the situation it's tense. I know there's people are going to be disagreeing with it. People are going to be agreeing with it. I understand both sides. Now the thing is, I think it's a great step forward.
Yeah.
If you want change, you can't be afraid of change. You feel me?
I feel
So
you.
yeah, so I mean, it's all one step at a time. It's been 90 years since an American, okay, 88 exactly, but almost 90 years since the president of the United States of America has gone to Cuba.
Okay.
Almost 100 years we've cut off relationship with Cuba.
Okay.
Now, I understand why, because of the communist government. The government treats the people horribly. It's a dictatorship, and there's no human rights and all that stuff. I totally understand that aspect, and I'm with the people of Cuba.
Okay.
But I feel that by the U.S. trying to make an effort with the Cuban government to promote or to influence change of that government is a good step forward. You
Okay.
know,
Now let me stop you there.
go ahead.
Now the U.S. government stepping in and pronouncing that they want to, end this embargo, which they say they can't, but they can, well, with only unless they have the government or the Congress's approval. Do you think that by the government stepping in, do you think it's right for them to put money into this country, which is tortured and has put people in jail for standing out and speaking against the government? Do you think it's right to be pouring money into this economy of this country, even though all these years, and yet the country has not even changed in the past 50 years? If you can see, the country, I mean, under Fidel Castro was pretty much the same, but there has been some few changes here and there with Raul, but not enough to spark a revolution or a change of government. It is still communist. Do you think it's right for the United States to put in that money into the government like that without even any change?
Well, Alec, my colleague has a great question to ask. First and foremost, as you were talking about that,
Yeah.
I feel that regarding the issue by the embargo,
Mm-hmm.
look back, the embargo didn't start till 1962. So it's been around since 1962 till now, present day. It all began with the President John F. Kennedy. He inflicted
Okay.
that restrict travel and trade to Cuba, which had a big impact on the Cuban economy. Can you believe that the Cuban economy, after the embargo was implemented, they lost approximately $1.126 trillion over the next 50 years, according to the Cuban government.
Okay.
So, in regards to that, only the Congress of the United States of America can help remove the Embargo Act. President Obama has tried as much as he can through his powers of executive powers, but he can only do so much. So
But
regarding
but
the
but there
aspect of
has to be something. I mean, if it was beneficial for the country of Cuba to not have this embargo, then why hasn't it not been lifted yet? Why? Do you understand what I'm saying?
so that's a good point. That's why I feel like this is a progress step forward, because if you look at President Obama's administration, they're trying, like they realize that the past 50, 60 years of no contact, ignoring Cuba, isolating them, has not worked. It's been
Okay.
the same situation for the past 60 years, okay?
Okay.
So now Obama's trying to change that to see, hey, you know what? Let's take a new perspective, let's take a new approach in fixing Cuba, helping the Cuban people, and forming a relationship with Cuba to maybe teach and maybe help them reform their government. But we're not going to be stepping involved. And that was a clear thing that Obama said, which I really liked a lot. He says, we're not going to do it for you. It's up to the Cuban people, the Cuban government to change from the within, which is
Okay.
a great thing, I think. But regarding the aspect of, giving the Cuban government money, all this stuff, I don't think it's just, I mean, besides the Cuban government, we're actually going to be opening up commercial airlines. So now we're going to have people able to travel to the country of Cuba, right? So
Correct.
with some people, we're going to have international people, American people, Cuban exiles, all these people coming back to the country, flowing in and out. That's going to, in return, bring business, bring tourism. It's going to boost the economy. By boosting the economy, it can help the people living standards improve. Okay, so traveling to Cuba, that's number one. Commercial stuff, business, that's all thing. Number two, by business entrepreneurs going to Cuba, which I heard today on CBS 4 in South Florida, a Cuban business entrepreneur. He wants to go to Cuba, not to open a business. He wants to educate the Cuban people of how to open their own business and thrive
Okay,
in.
but you cannot educate the people unless the government is changed. You understand? I mean,
Let
yeah,
me.
let's say this whole government does change. I mean, not the government. Let's say this whole economy changes. There's money flowing in, tourism goes. But the government is still communism. For example, let's look at Vietnam. When Vietnam lost, or when America lost the Vietnam War, Vietnam took over South Vietnam, North Vietnam, and they came together and became a communist government. To this day, they are still a communist government, but they have opened their doors and their policies to increase the capital within the country. Now, what I'm saying is, even though you're increasing the capital within Cuba, it's still gonna be a communist government at the end of the day. People are still gonna get murdered. People are still gonna get protest. They're gonna protest and still get arrested. Look, I mean, when we saw the first day when Obama visited,
True.
we saw this huge protest of people on the streets,
On the ladies
women,
in white,
women
yeah.
wearing these white shirts.
All the ladies in white,
This was
yes.
the first time I have ever seen a protest by the Cuban people on TV. And myself, I'm half Cuban. My mother derives from she was born in Cuba. She left at the age of 11.
Hmm.
But I've had my grandfather. He could not leave Cuba. My grandmother was able to leave Cuba, but my grandfather was drafted into the Cuban military. He wasn't allowed. You know, it's stuff like that that the communist government still controls an authoritarian state that you can't really get rid of when you have these capital gains coming into the country. So what I'm suggesting is, even though you're saying you're bringing an entrepreneur into the country, um, how is that going to change the education when the education and the still mental thought is that we're going to keep a communist flow into the country? You know what I'm saying? We're going to teach these kids that the socialism benefit and the teaching of Karl Marx is going to stay the same. But I guess we have to do the same thing what China does, right?
Answer your question about education. Now, did you know that education in 2013 by the UN rankings ranked Cuba 0.743 out of an index of 1? So the closer to 1 means the higher the level of education. So imagine 0.743. That's not too bad. And let me tell you this, Cuba right now has free universal education for everybody in Cuba. Can you believe that the literacy rate in Cuba is 99.8%? That is high. And it is mandatory for Cubans, mind you, the Cuban population, to attend schooling in Cuba.
Uh huh.
And that's an interesting fact. Now, besides that, going on to why and stuff like that, today they were talking about Raul Castro and what he was talking to Obama. Raul Castro said that he wants to step down, and he wants to step down in 2018.
I heard
So,
that too, but that
so
was
he,
before
he's,
Obama came.
yeah. So imagine. So Fidel Castro's ill. He's faded away now. That was Mr. Number One that everybody was concerned about. He's faded away. Now his brother came in. Now what he's doing now is, I think that his brother. This is my opinion. I feel that his brother said he realized what's going on. It finally clicked in his mind. Say, you know what? I need to change stuff here before I leave, so that people don't hate me or hate my legacy or whatever it may be. I need to start change for positive. Maybe this whole communism is wrong. I guess after the Soviet Union deteriorated and only North Korea, which is a communist government right now, left, and Cuba, of course, I think they realized that they have no more allies in the world and that their economy and their country is suffering. So I guess he finally said, okay, I understand that I need to change our ways and we need to be on the side of the right, the more powerful, obviously, unfortunately, but the more powerful, more democratic countries, the United States and the European Union. But besides that, I think he's going to be stepping down. So once he steps down, the next person that comes in, I feel like they're going to be not as bad as Fidel and Raul Castro. I feel like that's going to be a big turning point right there when the Castro family leaves government.
Stop for 1 second. The, let's share the stream real quick. Go ahead and post it everyone on your Facebook. Please post and share the stream. This is a very interesting topic. Ahmed, go ahead and share it with your followers. I'm gonna share it with my followers. Go ahead and share it on your Facebook. I'm gonna share it on mine. Let's continue after we share this real quick. This is a very interesting topic. Huh?
How do you share it?
Oh, just go to my profile and hit share.
Okay.
On Facebook. Yeah, that's right, guys. If you really want to know about what's going on, the situation deeply affecting us in Cuba, I think there's only one person watching us. But if you're watching us, let me know your answers and questions or your thoughts. I want to know what your concerns are because this is a very deep issue that's affecting many South Floridians here. And the fact that this economy and this community is built on the actions of Fidel Castro, I think this is a very, very great issue that we have to really focus on ourselves because, even though the whole nation sees this as an opening and a new place to travel, this seems like an issue that many of us, including my mom, myself, and many of my friends over here in South Florida, don't really agree with.
It's unfortunate. I mean, I could see why. I could see the past, the exiles.
You just
when they had
commented.
forced,
You didn't.
when they forced.
Did you comment? Did you comment or did you share?
I shared it.
You sure? Oh, okay.
So my thing is, are we still live? We're good?
Oh yeah, we're good.
So my thing is, I understand people. Look, I can relate because I studied abroad. I studied in Damascus, Syria. Now, if none of you don't know where that is, it's in the middle,
Hold up.
and it's where
Let's start recording this conversation now. Hello, YouTube followers. I'm just trying to get rid of some stuff real quick.
Just give me a thumbs up when we're ready.
All right. Give me a second. Okay, let's start this again. But let's start on the issue of foreign relations. So go ahead and speak your mind.
No, like I can understand. Look, I have friends that are Cuban American, born in America, as from birth, right? And I have friends who were born in Cuba and have come over from Cuba to America, and we got the citizenship, and of course, that was great.
Okay.
Now I can understand that their family members, some of them, were political exiles. Okay, fleeing the country, persecuted and stuff like that. Totally understandable. I can see why they have that anger and that hatred towards the Castro government, the communist government in Cuba. Totally understandable. Now, it's hard because then you have other individuals who don't have family members who are affected by it,
Yeah.
So I feel that if we keep on dwelling in the past, then there will never be a change for the better of the future.
But what do we do about all those people that the Castro regime killed and tortured? Do we just simply forget that? And I mean, even after this, this change in government, or not change in government, but this status quo between relations, do you think Fidel Castro or Raul Castro, who I guess who's the president now, is going to just stop torturing people or just stop putting them in prison? Do you think it's going to stop?
Not so fast. No, it's all baby steps. Unfortunately, it's all baby steps right now. This was a very big step. If you think about it, why do you think Raul Castro reached out and Obama reached out to each other and started working on this deal to compromise to better both countries, to better both relationships between both countries? Why would he do that if he had so much hatred? If he was all in power, he had everything he wanted. He didn't have to do that.
Hmm.
So I feel like he's trying to transition and leave the government with his family, Castro. That, oh look, I left on a good note. I'm giving you all back the country. Our family's done. I feel like when he steps down, that's when things are going to start changing. I feel like when he steps down, there's going to be possibilities for voting or for choosing another leader and stuff like that. But it all takes time. It depends on the Cuban people and the
So
Cuban.
I have an example to
Sure.
contradict that.
Sure.
China. How long
Okay.
has China been communist?
I would look that up, I guess. Let's see.
China has been communist since about the 1940s, 1950s, I want to say. China was communist. They practiced socialism for a couple of decades, and then they resorted to capitalism in the 70s, 80s. But the government is still communist. You know, if you ever go to China and you wanted to look up something, you know, that you look up fine here in the United States, or you know,
So, look up 1949 is when
yeah.
China became a
So
communist.
since 1949, China has been communist, and until this day, they still claim they are communist. You know,
Mhm.
they don't allow. Well, they do have protesters, but they don't allow extreme protesting. They hate it. And another thing is that communist China, whenever you go on the internet over there, or whenever you try to look up something, or you know, you try to do something against the government's will, they shut you down, or they shut down their own internet. You know, for a couple hours, or let's say there's a you know, an argument going on with the government. People don't like it. They'll shut down the government for a couple hours to make people cool off. But you don't get that here in the United States. So what I'm saying is, if even though China has been a communist government for such a long time, and with capital influences in the past few decades, why haven't we seen a change in China? Why hasn't there been a democracy or free elections?
Well, that's a great question you brought up, and unfortunately, the reason I believe it's my opinion again. It's
Hmm.
one of the dominant countries in the world among America, right?
Hmm.
And I feel like interests from other countries depend on what they can offer or what they have. For example, when we invaded Iraq, Iraq had a lot of oil. So it was an interest of government to invade, take the oil, and
Okay.
prosper from it. Let's say Africa, the continent of Africa. So let's say we invade Africa. They have rich diamonds, rich minerals, stuff like that. So there's always a benefit behind it. So
Okay.
right now, I feel like it's all a political issue between America and China and the world in China, since China has a dominant force in the eastern part of the world. So it's tricky, and I feel like since there's not such a big concern, since it's maybe far away, I guess you could say in a sense that they're not really pursuing it. But look at North Korea. That's a great example of communism, an isolated country.
Yeah, but are they capitalists? No, they're not. They're very socialist.
Who are we referring to?
North Korea.
Yeah, of course. Like it's just isolated for the world.
Yeah.
But for Cuba, I feel like since it's close to America and it's had such a long history of back and forth between each other, I feel like America said, "Hey, look, you know what? We can benefit from this by importing business, exportation, importation, whatever it may be. You know, bringing Cubans to America, bringing those innovators, those people who can contribute to both Cuba and America. I feel like there was a lot of benefit there. That's why they decided to move towards Cuba than to the other communist government. I think it's one at a time. I feel like if Cuba changes, then it's going to be China and North Korea left by themselves, you know?
I see. Yes.
So I feel like they're trying to isolate the rest of the communistic.
But I mean, then again, China is so big. China has about maybe what? I guess almost what is it? 2 billion people that live there. And
Problem.
how
Yeah,
many people live in the world? Like 6 billion.
around 7, 6 billion. Yeah,
So what is that? Maybe one third of the world's population lives in China.
a lot of people. Yeah.
So could you safely say that there's more people that live in a communist country than there are people that live in a democratic free country?
I won't say that because you have America, you have Canada, you have Europe. Um, I feel like no, I feel like there's
Okay, let me change this up. How about this? Do you think more people on this planet live in a socialist country more than they do in a free enterprise country or a free market country?
No, I think it's the opposite. I think that there's more of a democratic influence. By the way, I think your dad's behind you. How's it going, sir?
Hey, watch the stream, okay? Watch the stream. I'm gonna send you a link to the stream, okay?
What do you mean?
We're streaming right now.
What are we streaming?
Oh,
We're streaming about the Cuban government.
I think that that there's more of a free enterprise market that's going on.
I'm gonna send you the link, all right? Go ahead and watch it. All right, so yeah, so what we're saying is the government, how China is basically taking over the planet.
Clean your room, man.
What can I say? You can't talk politics with a dirty room. I mean, can you? I can. Anyways, so China, as we're looking into China, the government over there has been constantly investing money into the United States. Do they really care about communism anymore? You think?
The U.S.
No, China. Do you think they care about expanding communism anymore as they used to? I remember back.
I think it's all a political thing. It's just all look. It's just for these leaders to stay in power as long as they can. Let me tell you a story. Before we had cut off that earlier, I lived in Syria, Damascus of Syria, which is Damascus is the capital of Syria.
Okay.
If some of you don't know, it's located in the Middle East. That's where the whole Arab Spring Revolution started, and that's where pretty much the whole.
When it happened, right?
Actually, I left about 3 or 4 months before it happened, so I was blessed to get out of there in time. But imagine, I was living in that country for about almost 5 years, and that's a dictatorship country. By Bashar al-Assad, he's a dictator of that country. So living there, I saw the secret police. I saw all the control of people. They can't speak their mind. They don't have freedom of speech. If you go against the government, you go sent to jail, or you can be executed or exiled. Imagine that. There's no freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's Sharia law, correct?
No, that's not Sharia law.
So they didn't practice Sharia law.
It's a secular government. So living in that dictatorship country, third world country, I can have a sense of going back to what our topic is of Cuba and the Cuban people living there under that rule. It's tough. It's not easy. When I was living on that dictatorship, it was not easy. I had to watch what I say. I had to watch where I go. I had to always praise, the president of that country. It was annoying, to be honest with you. It was ridiculous. It's like a 15th century monarch, and I feel like it's ridiculous for one family to rule forever. And I feel the reason is that the own people of that country are either too scared, don't have the resources, don't care, or ignorant. All those type of factors play a role.
Okay, let's look into the. Go ahead.
Suppresses those people. And that's what I saw. The government suppresses them so that they don't know what the outside world is.
Let's look into the pros of communism. What are the pros?
You tell me. Go ahead. You should talk some more.
Okay, pros of communism here. Everybody likes to put socialism and communism hand in hand, right? So I like to, describe it as one. But when it comes to I don't want to call myself a communist, but I'm saying the creators or the artists or the authors of this Cuban communist government or any communist country around the world, when they started a revolution for the communist government, they think about the people in a general sense, people as a whole. They don't think about just the rich people, or they don't just think about just the poor people. So when they saw people in the streets, just like, I guess you know who Che Guevara is, right?
Yeah.
Che, basically. He was into Marxism, which was, the ideal of what communism was born out of. And communism communist governments are created by people who see individuals, or they see things within their country that they see the poor or the middle class not striving to succeed, or they just see them, or there's no middle class being created. Communist government makes everybody equal, which I guess that's what the Cubans saw before Castro came in power, that everyone wasn't equal. There was people in the streets that were dying. There was probably no food anywhere. I mean, to this day, even with a communist government, there still isn't any food. But I guess you can say that communism hasn't worked. The idea that communism works for is for the potential good, but it's not good. It sucks. And the thing is, the way that the government and Castro has constantly used their authoritarian government and power on people is because that they don't want to have any revolution. They don't want anyone taking them over. They don't want nobody to do that. And people, when they're not getting any, see, there's no money in Cuba. There's no money in Cuba. So
It goes to
communism.
kind of saying that the government has the control over the people, and that control of the people, they
But see,
can
they
overwhelm the
they
government.
they do that. They do that because there's no money in Cuba, and the reason for that is because when their people are dying and can't eat, even under the communist government, they want to rebel. I mean, think about how Russia and the Soviet Union, fell apart. They fell apart because there was no money coming in. Communism was is done. They had the Afghanistan war
Mhm.
in the 80s, and they tried to what is it establish the communism in Afghanistan, but it didn't work. So they spent all this money and all these resources on the freaking Afghanistan war, and they hit the recession, hit them hard. There was a recession in the 80s, affect the whole world. The United States was in a recession at the time too with Reagan, but he helped turn it over. But what I'm saying is, when you have no money to support a communist government, the people rebel. And when they rebel, that's when the communist government takes an authoritarian action against its people. Now, I know a lot of people died in Cuba and were tortured. And, I'm pretty sure some members of my family were murdered or killed in one time. But I guess you could say that I'm not a supporter of Castro. I'm not. I hate Castro. I hate the Castro family. Everybody in that family. Not the exiles though. The other family that came over here. But I think that when you change the government for something good, like this thing, it can't be done. You cannot affect the population as a whole. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
communism probably could have lasted for maybe 10 years in Cuba. With the socialism, but then after that, there's no money coming in. The embargo, the U.S. made the great idea. The best thing that ever happened, or they thought of, for Cuba was the embargo, which totally, killed. It probably killed Cuba's economy within the first 20 years, and they still kept it going.
Like I told you, the embargo resulted in a loss of approximately 1.126 trillion 50 years. Imagine how much money that affected the Cuban government and the Cuban people.
Well, aren't we worth
And,
$17 trillion right now?
huh?
The
Yeah.
government.
US, yeah. Well, us U.S. we're almost $18 trillion in debt. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, but that embargo, that effect it had on the Cuban government and the people, had a dramatic effect. And imagine, no money, the level of the line of living decreases. If there's no income, then it's going to start decreasing. You have your poverty zones, and that's the same stuff I noticed when I was overseas in that dictatorship country of Syria. Is that you either had poor or the rich. There was no middle class in between. Either you were really poor or you're filthy rich, and that's the only two classes that are available there. And that's just wrong. The 1%, 2%, or whatever population that has all the money controlling the whole
Now, would you
freaking
rather have
continent.
that, or would you rather a have everybody equal? Would you rather have everyone making the same money?
No, well, no, not. Well, if everybody makes the same money, then there's no competition. There's no way to
Now,
improve.
see. I think
Uh,
what happened here was that there was a lot of people in Cuba. A lot of these people, individuals, were very poor. Okay, you had the very low class people who had no money, and they saw these rich people in Cuba, American money spent in Cuba, and they were like, man, we had enough. So I guess this anywhere in the world, or not even in just Cuba, but socialism affects those people the most. And when it comes to capitalism, see, that's the thing that a lot of people worry about. When Cuba starts making capital gains in the country, that poor class is going to come back again. Those people the most.
I I totally agree. And check this out. About the embargo. Like I said, 1962 to present. Um,
John F. Kennedy.
yeah, like think about that. From 1962 until 2016, no change, just an embargo inflicting the Cuban government the island. So why do you stay on one consistent path? Shouldn't you change if you know it's not going to work?
Hmm.
Right now, what we're doing with the Obama administration is optimism. That's what we call optimism, positivity. And they're being hopeful that by the Cuban government reaching out and the American government reaching back, that we can establish a future democratic country of Cuba.
Okay.
Now, let's go back in Cuban history, okay? We
Just for a
know
second,
that.
make sure you guys share the stream. Come out. This is reflecting on Obama's trip to Cuba. We us as South Floridians are taking an issue and an opinion on this. So if you can, please do us a favor and share the stream. Thank you so much. Go ahead and continue, Dr. Allenhouse.
Appreciate it, thank you. Um,
Or future doctor, I'm sorry. No legal. I mean, you're outside the country, so you're not.
well, let me introduce myself. My name is Ahmed
Uh-huh.
Almahas. I'm a second-year medical student, and I'm having the privilege with my colleague Alec Leilani to talk about Cuba and how us South Floridians feel about what's happened this past weekend with our American government, Obama administration, going down to Cuba, meeting with Raul Castro and his administration, and hopefully trying to work out future deals of peace and prosperity and opening of dialogue between both countries. So
Okay.
there's a brief history of Cuba, right? Um, did you know that it was colonized? Let's go back in time and see how Cuba
Well,
got where it is,
this is
right?
where I come in, people. I'm a history major, so I'm going to be, you know, talking about the history sense of what do you say, communist government and its influences in the past. I'm also, I focus on areas of contemporary history in the 1950s. I'm a history major from the University of Florida. I mean, not University, Florida International University. I'm sorry. I work in the admissions department over there, so I'm too, I got so many
So
schools in
I'm
my
gonna,
head. But I'm from Florida International University. I'm a history major. I graduated with a bachelor's degree, and I'm also focusing on communism governments and the influences on the 80s, the Cold War, and contemporary history. So let's go back into history,
so
Mr.
Alex,
Almahas.
okay, so I'm gonna just bring up topics, and you can extend your knowledge of his background to our viewers that are watching this, or
Yes.
just currently started watching this. So Cuba was colonized by Spain in the 15th century.
Hmm. It was colonized. Say it again.
It was colonized by Spain in the 15th century.
So were many Latin American countries around that time.
Okay?
Not late 15th century. Columbus came to America in 1492.
Mhm. And Cuba became independent after the Spanish-American War of 1868 to be called de facto U.S. Protectorate in 1902 on May 20th.
Yeah, it was American Spanish Civil War, correct? And around that time, we as Americans invaded Cuba to protect the government from the government. Well, we wanted to declare independence for the Cuban people against the Spaniards. And at that time, we were making great relations. Teddy Roosevelt, one of our presidents, led the Rough Riders through Cuba and helped fought battles with the Rough Riders against the Spaniards. And it was with the American people that we helped the Cuban people establish their own identity, which was great. Um, but other than that, we see that in the past, Cuba has had America's help when it comes to the most dire situations. Um, you know, let it be the Spaniards or its economy that's happening now. A lot of things have had an issue in the past, and it's always Cuba's big brother up north, 90 miles away, to come down and rescue it sometimes. And I don't know, maybe Obama's coming down to do it, rescuing it for the second time, or because they didn't sure as hell didn't rescue it during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1963 or 4, yeah, 63.
Well, the missile crisis was in 1962.
62. Okay, I'm sorry, a year late. Hmm.
So,
Trying to check,
so
fact
after
check me right there, huh?
no, no, it's for our viewers so they know that that we're trying to be as honest as we can and to promote truth here and our own opinions and views of what Cuba's going through in the background of Cuba.
Okay.
So in 1902, it declared independence from the U.S. And later on, about 50 years later, in 1952, Fulgencio Batista
Yeah, President
became the
Batista.
dictator of Cuba in 1952.
Hmm.
Between 1952 and 1959, Fulgencio Batista was removed from power in 1959 by the revolution and the leader Fidel Castro, right?
Okay.
So in 1959, he was removed. Now, in 1965 till present, the communist government has been in place called the Communist Party of Cuba, which was ruled by the Castro family, aka Fidel Castro as the president, and Raul Castro as vice president at that time. Of course, now as time goes on, Fidel Castro steps down due to illnesses, and Raul Castro becomes the president. So
Hmm.
that's 1965 till present day 2016. Cuba established the Communist Party of Cuba government. So what else? What can I tell you from all that history of what it went through? I mean, not only through the independence and the wars and the colonization and to a leader and to being overthrown and revolution and stuff like that. There's been constant
Yes.
change going on in that country. If we look at the country, the Republic of Cuba is one of the largest islands in the Caribbean, right?
Yes.
Second most populous in the Caribbean, about 11 million people that currently live there. And of course, the language is Spanish, as we know. The capital is Havana, right? And the interesting thing that interests me the most is the diversity in Cuba. It has an Aboriginal Taino, Taino, if I pronounce it wrong, excuse me, and Siboney, if I pronounce it wrong, excuse me as well, and African
Descent.
background because, sorry, excuse me, descent, because of course the slave trade went through there and there was a slave process of buying and selling in Cuba during that time. So it's a very diverse country. It's a very explosive country of constant change. And mind you, it's only 227 miles from Miami, Florida to the capital of Havana, about 365 kilometers. So it's a very close country with all this change, with all this history, rich history. I can see why America and Cuba really want this to work.
Now, some of our viewers here don't know that this. I'm actually skyping from you. You're actually skyping me from an island in the Caribbean right now. Correct.
Yes,
Why
sir.
don't you let them know where you're currently located in the Caribbean?
Sure. So since I said I'm a second year medical student, I'm currently attending Ross University School of Medicine in an island called Dominica in the
Huh?
West Indian Caribbean islands. Now, the interesting fact you brought that up, when I was doing a community clinic in the hospital here, um, and we had to get some x-rays for the patient, guess who the doctor was? A Cuban doctor from
Oh,
Cuba.
what do you know?
So it's pretty interesting. I was very fascinated because do you know in Cuba that they have universal health care?
Yeah.
And did you know this is a very interesting fact, and to the viewers too. They were the first country to eradicate mother to child HIV and syphilis transmission.
But
They were
how do you
they were
document that? Like,
they were ranked number 39 out of 190 countries in healthcare in the world by the UN ranking.
now what about America? What do they rank at?
Excuse me?
What does America rank at?
Well, Cuba ranks at number 39. America ranks at number 37 out of 190.
Okay.
So it's only a difference of spots.
Now,
And
what is your view?
it's fascinating because
Do you ever talk to these residents on the island of Dominica about the Cuba and the Castro regime, or what are their thoughts about communism on the island?
I haven't really talked to the locals about this policy or these political views. But an interesting thing is when you drive, I remember I was driving around town here in a town called Portsmouth in Dominica. If you look at the wall, they had the president of Dominica shaking the hand of Fidel Castro,
Oh, really?
among with other presidents on the wall. So there is a relationship because there are people from this island that go to Cuba to study medicine and to study different things and come back. And there are Cubans who come over here, practice medicine, or teach or live here, and vice versa. So they do have some kind of program going on within the
So,
Caribbean.
so would you say that the island of Cuba, right?
Yeah.
I know we're kind of like moving off topic. We're talking about the healthcare and stuff like that, but after this, we're gonna get back into Obama's trip and stuff like that. But before we do, I want to ask you this: do you think that Cuba is the center of the Caribbean where everybody goes for medical school and then comes out? Like, do you hear stories of Cubans like leaving medical school and practicing in all these islands and like Jamaica or the Saint Virgin Islands or Trinidad? Do you see the Cubans as the best kind of doctors out there, like, or the best education? Do you think the Cuban education is the best in the medical field in the Caribbean?
Well, I can't say because I haven't met that many Cubans on
Have you,
this island or
have you
another
heard
island.
anything about it?
Like I told you, what I've researched upon, that their ranking is very close to the United States ranking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the best in the world, I would have to disagree because number one, France number one is ranked number one in the world on healthcare by the UN. So there are about 38 other countries ahead of Cuba in their healthcare system that are far better than the Cuban country. But I think everybody's working on progressing and moving their programs and teaching their people to become as best as they can be. Because in Cuba, they want their people to study because their goal is to better Cuba. That's
Okay.
what their goal is. You're studying here because we want you to better our country and our people.
Okay. All right. So let's get back to Obama's trip. So as you know, I guess was it Monday or was it Sunday? No, Monday. Obama went to Cuba. He was walking around. He was meeting people with him and Raul Castro. I guess this was the first time Raul ever had done a press conference because, as many of you do not know, Raul owns all the media in Cuba. The media in Cuba is state run. That which is basically no freedom of speech. Any communist government has it. China has the same thing. I guess Vietnam would have the same. North Korea, obviously, their whole media is run state run. But this was the first time that something could be said or asked, and it would. I guess the Cuban people. I don't know if the Cuban people were able to see this, but there was a particular question that got me going when one of the reporters, I guess was from the American side, asked about, you know, the political prisoners that were being held in Cuba. And Raul Castro answered and said, "There's no political prisoners." Can you believe that? And he said, when he first heard it, he pretended like he didn't hear it. He pretended like as if like, oh, yo, you talking to me or something. And you know, it's true. It's obviously true. There is political prisoners. I think he just said it just to move on and pretend like the reporter was lying or something. But it intrigued me a lot because it was the first time I ever the Cuban communist government was put on the spotlight to answer for its human rights violations. What do you think?
No, no, I think that when everybody's put in the spotlight, they're
Right.
always careful what they do.
Okay.
And I spent all those remarks about there's no prisoners, whatever. I know that people on Facebook, people on internet are blasting out lists and lists of people who've been detained and imprisoned because of their political views against the government. Now, I can see why he deflected the question to move on, like you said. But I felt like Obama came there and expressed himself and showed him what type of qualities and things we look for as Americans in our country. Like if you're watching his speech today to the Cuban people, he said it, and he was very slick and very polite about this and other points. He's like, these are my opinions. I'm not trying to force on, it's my opinions. But this is how we do things back in the States.
Uh-huh.
You know, freedom of speech, freedom to protest, freedom to elect your officials, to vote, right? Freedom for the people. They can say whatever they want to say. They can get their businesses. They can work, education, healthcare, all these things. People have the right to all these different things. It's not just they're blessed for it. No, they deserve all equal rights, just like back in the States, you know? If they want to protest the government, they want to criticize the government, they should be allowed to do these things. And he was saying these things, saying, oh, it's my opinion, but he was actually telling the government, hey, look, this is how we do things, this is how it should be done, right?
Yeah.
So I thought the way he came out, and he was very respectful, and that's one thing about President Obama, is that he's a very respectful president, and he's smart, and he's considerate, and he knows what he's doing, you know? And yes, he can be criticized and put down whatnot, but I think he's doing a great job.
See, here's my problem. Here's my problem. I think that we should open up Cuba, but we shouldn't invest into their economy until things get better. Because obviously, you know, an open country means open people. Okay? I don't know if you ever heard of the Enlightenment. You ever heard of what the Enlightenment is? It's a time and period in history where people just kept on thinking, and you know, their ideals kept getting stronger, and the social identity of people started to develop. In the 18th century, late 18th century started to get developed. But these ideas of people, they kept thinking, you know, they said, hey, you know, we don't need to be ruled by a king anymore. We need to make our own government and make our own democracy, or vote for our own people. Like, we need to have someone of ourselves to represent us, or the people. So it's you know, getting rid of I guess this is our second coming of the Enlightenment, because this is the government, or you know, after the Cold War, a bunch of these communist governments broke away from Soviet Union, and look at Cuba. Cuba's breaking away from this communist government. I mean, sort of. They're still there, but I'm saying, if you allow people to think, if you allow them to think for a second about what can be done, because I know Cuba controls the media. Cuba arrests people that are going against the government. And if you, for a second, just stop that. If you stop arresting people, if you stop controlling the media, and you let people, for once, see what's going on, and you let them think, people amass groups. They amass the groups, and they start a revolution. That's how things happen here in America. You know, you have different ideas and different political groups. They think, people, you know, Republicans think, Democrats think, they come together and they change the government. That's what needs to happen in Cuba. People need to think, come together, and change the government. Not just sit there and let the Cuban government continue to constantly run the media, or run what's going on with the country, and arrest people and arrest protesters. No, they need to think, understand the situation, and continue it. And that's what I think needs to. I don't think I think it's right for Obama to open relations, because in 1960s, you know, like you said, or in history, Kennedy started the embargo, right? Kennedy started an embargo. He was a Democratic president. Okay? I think now is the right time, 50 years later, for the embargo to stop, and it has to be done by a Democratic president as well. Okay?
And you're bringing up very valid points, you know. And like I said, President Obama came there today, and he said that throughout class. He's like, well, "This is my opinions, but you should let your people have the freedom to speak, freedom of press, and freedom to voice their concerns about the government." He even said this. He's like, "Look, in America, people criticize me. They tell me things that I might be doing wrong, but what I do is I don't get offended. I don't go and arrest and whatnot. What we do in our society is that we take that criticism, right? What we call positive criticism, and we improve ourselves upon it. And that's how the government works. You take it in and you try to make things better. But the thing is with Cuba is like it's just like all the other countries in the Middle East. To be honest with you, I can relate to that because I was over there. Is that these people in power? They don't want to lose their power because if they lose their power, they lose all the fancy cars, all the expensive items they have, living conditions, all the money, the wealth, the fame. All that is gone. So they don't want to lose any of that stuff. So that's why they control the population of people. And just like you're saying, they control the press, they control the freedom to speak or to post and stuff like that. So by controlling all that, they remain in power and oppressed.
See, here's the thing. When I was, watching this whole trip go throughout the whole 3 days, what really made me mad was that, breaking news, Carnival Cruise Ships is going to start allowing the first cruises to go to Cuba from Miami. And you can't continue to give a bailout to these communist countries. Look, I mean, if Cuba, China, if China continues to say they're communists and they make all this money through capital gains, how are we supposed to do the same thing with Cuba? Cuba is getting all they're going to start receiving all this money from us. I know you said that once Raul Castro leaves, there's going to be a new government. But what if it's his son? What if it's a military dictator? I remember hearing that they want to continue a military state within Cuba. Now, sure, there's going to be a new person, but until the education and the views, and they stop of teaching the Marxism ways in the country, it will forever be communism. You cannot get rid of communism unless you stop teaching that stuff. It just,
Alec, it fascinates me because we talk about all the negativity of this country and the government, but it shocks me because, like I said, even the Human Development Ranking by the UN to Cuba they ranked them 67 out of 166 countries. The human development of Cuba.
Okay, but are people dying? Are people dying though?
But check out. And then the healthcare that we talked about, or reviews that were in here before, they were ranked number 39 out of 190. So look at the rankings and look at the literacy rate, 99.8, education 0.74, close to 1, which is the index. Like they have the education from what the UN and the WHO, World Health Organizations, have ranked them, shows that this country, this government, these people have so much potential, have the will to drive, the will to educate themselves, to make innovative ideas. Like we talked about, they eliminate the mother-to-child HIV syphilis transmission, the first country to do so. So,
but that's because they were isolated. You're gonna have that when you have a country isolated and have an embargo. Think about it. Once we lift this embargo, once we start not isolating Cuba, all these people are gonna come over there, and all the trade is gonna resume. Capitalism is gonna begin again, but it's gonna begin under the communist government. There's only two things that can happen after this. You can either go up or go down. For something to improve, I don't know, over the years with Raul Castro, I've noticed that the economy, this embargo has been working, and we have changed the economy in Cuba. There's a lot of private sectors, being established in Cuba. I don't know if you watched, I seen a video on Facebook recently about how saying a cab driver in Cuba makes more money than a doctor. You take about $60 a day as a cab driver in Cuba compared to like maybe $20 a day as a doctor. But it's slowly progressing. Okay, once you got the cab drivers,
But think about what you said. Carnival Cruises are going to start this May to do trips to Cuba. So think about this. Think about this real quick. Prior to this, right?
Yeah.
Since 1965, let's say 1962 when the embargo began, right? 1962 till 2016, there has been nothing, nada, zero, right?
Well, now from the U.S. though, there's been flights from Canada and other countries, but
we're talking about America. That's what I'm referring to, U.S. But now, check it out. 2016, there are going to be cruises to Cuba. What do cruises bring? Tourists. What does tourism bring to the country? Money and wealth. And with the tourists going to Cuba, being able to see Cuba, the capital of Havana, the old side of Cuba, the modern side, all these different mixtures, they're going to interact with who? The Cuban population. And the more interactions, the more connection between the Cuban people and all these tourists that are flushing in are going to what? Send a view of, oh my God, if they could do it, we could do it. They are people just like us. They have rights. Why can't we have rights? And I believe that this will impact the people of Cuba with this tourism, with the business,
All right. Let's
all this stuff.
let's go back.
No,
Let's
wait,
go back.
let me finish the point before you cut me off, please.
Okay.
It will motivate the people to push them to confront the government of Cuba. But I believe they'll confront them in a smart way, not in a aggressive or military, but in a smart way where they will voice their opinion, show them, hey, look, why does the whole world have all these rights, but yet we have to suffer under this? They're going to have the. When I was in Syria, and mind you, we talked about I came before. Prior
Now,
to
let me say something. Hold on. Now,
me coming back here to the U.S.,
you might be able to say that, but the thing is, if you keep pouring money into the government, correct? That means the Cuban Communist government, right, is going to collect this money that the tourism is going to be establishing over there. And when you have people like you're saying thinking and they're going to get mad how they're not going to be able to have this money just like the tourists, keep in mind that the government and the military will have even more money to quell the rebellions that are going to be happening in Cuba. They're going to be able to quell the protesting. They're going to have more money for their police, the secret police, or they're going to have more money for, to do all the stuff to continue and influence their communist government and to keep establishing it. If we do not change the communist government in Cuba, it will continue on its same path. Okay, you need to understand that. Okay, because just because there's tourists coming here and they bring in their ideas and stuff like that, you have to keep in mind that the communists is still there and they're collecting money and paychecks from all these private industries and they're pocketing it and using it to advantage to continue and expand their communist agenda. It might have been the only thing the embargo did was freeze the communist government for 50 years. It did not get rid of it because it's still there today. As you can see, when Obama visited Cuba, it's still the same way. People are protesting. They're hating the government. I mean, that was the first time I've ever seen a protest. But oh my God, I've never seen a protest in Cuba like that. I've never seen a protest at all.
It goes back to what I said. You just said yourself. The past 50 years, it's been a communist government. It's still a communist government. So we realize the past 50 years, this embargo didn't do nothing.
But how do we know?
Nothing
How do we know getting rid of the embargo is going to change
trace it? So that's the thing. You have to have optimism. You have to be optimistic and have hope for it. You have to be the first one to reach out and try and advocate for change. If you just stand still and don't do nothing, nothing will happen. That's my whole point, and that's what I'm trying to tell my people, my friends who are all mad and everything. If we don't make that effort to try for change, we can't be afraid of change, because change is what helps us move forward. What happened with Martin Luther King? He promoted change. What? Well, let's look at Martin Luther King. He fought for segregation. He fought for the blacks and the civil rights movement and everything in America. What happened? He pushed for that change, was uncomfortable with everybody else. But what happened to change? Look how adapted it is. Look, whites and blacks, Latinos, everybody living in America, it's all together. There's no more slavery from the past. There's no more segregation. But check this out. Besides the civil rights, look at gay rights. People were afraid for change. People pushed for it. They fought for it. And now they have the Supreme Court rule for it. And now
you have to remember, though, that our government allows for that to expand. Not the Cuban government. We have a constitution.
Change is good. Change is positive. If we're afraid of change, nothing will happen, and Cuba will stay as a dictatorship and will never change. And the people of Cuba
won't have. All right, let's get back to Obama's trip, okay? We're a little bit off topic here. We're going to Martin Luther King and change, but let's go back and let's try to stay a little bit on topic, okay?
it's not off topic. I'm referring from facts to what's actually
All right.
happening.
All right. So another thing I
I'm
saw
referring
today
to
on
what
the trip
changed
today
the people.
for Obama, he went to a baseball game today in Cuba with the
Yeah.
Tampa Bay Rays versus the Cuban national team, and I guess Raul Castro took him to a stadium, or they played the game in the stadium where Jackie Robinson, the first black um, Major League Baseball player, played before he went to the Major League Baseball league.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't know if Raul did this on purpose because Obama was an African American, or was it because maybe that there was more people in that stadium that are minorities, or I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I just
I highly doubt that he did it because he was an African American.
I mean,
I
hey,
highly
hey,
doubt that.
Obama is the first African American president.
I understand that, but I highly doubt. Oh, let me take him to a baseball game because Jackie Robinson played here because he's black to make him happy because he's black. I highly doubt that. I feel like it was a very nice, correlated, peaceful game between an American baseball team and the Cuban national team to show again that we're extending the relationships, the communication. We're advocating to promote better dialogue between our countries. And this was just a better connection, better dialogue, peaceful thing between two nations' baseball teams. And both presidents were having a good time watching both of their teams play. And it was a peaceful thing. And then now Obama's going to Argentina to go meet with the government over there. And it's just part of the process. It was just a friendly match. That's my opinion, again. But that's how I perceived it.
Okay. Well, I don't know. What I perceived it as was that Raul Castro was trying to, I guess, suck up to Obama, to, to get him to, bring the economy, you know, economic gains to the country. I think that's maybe what it was. But I mean, what was it? One of the baseball players from the Tampa Bay Rays. I saw this today on ESPN. This was the first time he came back to Cuba. He was a Cuban immigrant who came to Miami to leave the Castro administration or the regime, and he came to Miami. He fled the regime because he couldn't take it anymore. And this was his first time back in 2 years. He hasn't seen his family in 2 years, and he cried. And this man, he said that I forgot what his name was. I think it was Fernandez or something, about the baseball player. But he said that Cuba has not changed since I left it. Not even with all the new measures that are becoming. I mean, I understand that change takes a while to take place, but he was, he was thinking like there should have been at least something, some change.
Let me tell you this. You bring this up, right? Mind you, they have this process recently started in December, so it's January, February, it's only
2014, 2014,
all right, 2014, whatever. But
December 2014. Yeah.
the real movement had just been these past couple months. Look, they started working on the banks, they started working on the airlines, commercial traveling. Now they're starting to work on trying to allow businesses and entrepreneurship to come into things. So slowly, it takes time. Change doesn't happen in one day. Rome wasn't built in one day. Change occurs over a while, Why I go back to the civil rights. How long did that take? It took years. Change took years. Gay
Yeah,
rights.
but I mean, to not even see a small amount of change, like at least a small. What I'm saying, I understand Rome wasn't built in a day, but man, at least you could see the shops of Rome being built in the first few weeks or months.
Mind you,
That's all I gotta say. I mean, hey, this guy left Cuba for 2 years and still hasn't seen not one change.
the embargo is still in place. Let's not forget that, Mr. Leilani, because the embargo is still in place. It's preventing trade and a lot of
That's only with Cubans,
restrictions
with
Cuba.
Americans.
That's what I'm saying with Cuba.
There's
But
still other countries out there.
yeah, but what other countries are really
Canada,
helping Cuba benefit? Like they're giving them so much
Canada,
effort and power and good
Venezuela.
and trade. But like, are these countries like America, like European countries? No, that's not. There are other third world countries that are working together. You know, so and that's why I feel like going back to what we talked about earlier to our viewers who just tuned in. We had described what I described about how since the Soviet Union disintegrated, fell apart, and now you have North Korea isolated by itself, and China and Cuba. I think Raul Castro realized, hey, I don't have any more friends out there. I think I should side with the people who are more influential, more powerful, that can help us and help my country. So I feel like his how would you say it, light bulb turned on
Hmm.
and said, hey, you know what? I need to do something before I leave and step down to the 18. So I think now that's what's motivating. I think now he wants friends and allies and to be involved in the world.
So I'm gonna ask the biggest question of the night, and I think we all want to know: is Fidel Castro dead?
That's a good question. I've thought that's a really good question. Really, I've thought about it.
I mean,
Um,
we didn't see him with Obama at all, did we? He would. I would have thought he came out, and
I mean, it's tough because they said that a mysterious illness. Of course, they won't tell you what the illness is because they don't want him to look bad or to look weak to the Cuban people. Because if the Cuban people realize that their leaders are dying or very ill, they might say, "Hey, you know what? It's time to go. Let's revolt." So either he could be alive barely, or coming to a close end of death, or he's died and they've kept it on the hush hush.
mm,
It could be either or. It depends on what their motive is, Mr. Leilani. So,
well, I think he's dead. I haven't
you know,
seen the man in like maybe
why,
3 years or four
why do you
years. When was the last time you seen him?
same thing? Live on TV, I would say it had to be like, what,
Years.
2 years ago, right? 2 years. I can't recall, but I
I
remember.
believe he's dead. I mean, I understand that you're right. The Cuban people don't want to see him, sick or dead or revolt against, the Cuban government because of that. But I think he's dead, and I think they're just keeping it hush because they don't want, people to find out he's dead. And it's got to be Raul that has to be the one taking over the country and making all his decisions. But lately, since he's been taking over as from Fidel, there has been a lot of change in the country. Minimal. I don't want to say a lot. I want to say minimal. There's been a minimal amount of change. I hear now that Cubans have internet since 2010 or whatever.
So then why do you say, oh, there's no change happening? You just brought up a great point, internet. Even though it's not
Okay,
amazing, it's a step forward. Like we said, baby steps. It takes baby
because
steps.
listen, the fact it's the same thing with the state-run TV and news over there in Cuba. It's still going to be ran by the government. The government is going to control everything from the news to the internet. It's like basically getting internet on your phone and saying you can't see this. You've been blocked. Hey, I've been blocked on this website. You're not allowed to see it. Cuban government says so. That's
I've had the same thing in Syria when I was living there. I couldn't access certain things. I know the feeling. I know how it is. And yes, you're right. You're totally right. But I feel like as time progresses, and as President Obama mentioned today, the people of Cuba should be allowed to have Wi-Fi service, internet service, Bluetooth, to let them talk to the world, let them network out there and bring people, connect with people. That's what they need. We're in the freaking 21st century, and we still have monarch rule like Saudi Arabia and dictatorship rule in the Middle East and Cuba and all these other different countries. It's ridiculous. Like how, like when you agree, like we're in the 21st century and still these people are applying things from ages ago. Like people are just getting fed up with this. Like I'm just shocked that people deal with it in the first place, but I can see why, because either they're ignorant to the fact, they don't have the resources, or they don't have the will to, try to act to change. It's just crazy out there.
everyone. This is my colleague Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner. I like to call him that because he looks like that. But you are right. There's still some change. You got to see it here and there. We were progressing. We're in the beginning. Hopefully, I'm hoping before the year 2020, there will be free elections in Cuba. That is my goal. That is what I want to see. I do not want to step into a Cuba that is under communist rule. That is my thing. That's my personal reasons. I have family reasons for that. But until we see some change, I am not stepping in that country. I
I,
understand you might have some different reasons, maybe that, but not $1 or penny will be donated from me to the Castro regime. I'm sorry.
Well, I have to disagree with you that I'm actually excited. I just want to book a flight, book cruise to Cuba because first of all, this is to me this is a very historical moment in my life. I feel like this is an opportunity, once in a lifetime, to be honest with you. Because imagine 90 years, well, 88 exactly, but almost 90 years, a U.S. president has not set on soil of Cuba. In the past, let's say, what, 52 years, well, since 1962, the embargo, so now, they just cut them off. So now these are in a historical moment where our country, our government is with the Cuban government and are trying to work together to finally change history and to finally help the people of Cuba. And that's what President Obama said in his speech. He wants to help the people of Cuba, but the only way he can help them if they help themselves and the government as well. But I am willing. I can't wait to go there. I want to meet the people of Cuba. I want to see all the sites and all the places, all the history of Cuba. I want to eat the delicious Cuban food. Que rico! It's always so good. I have so much love. I have so much love for Cuban people and the Cuban population. So it's just I'm excited to be honest with you. This is a once in a lifetime thrill to finally be able to go somewhere where it's been restricted for such a long time. And I can see why you wouldn't do it, but for me, I'm just trying to take this moment and turn it to positivity. Maybe meet Cuban people over there, interact with them, have a dialogue like we're having right now with our viewers watching us. It's great for me. I'm so happy and excited to be honest with you.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to express your opinion tonight. I'm grateful for that. For our viewers out there, thank you for joining us for our little opinion, on the South Floridian side of Obama's trip to Cuba.
So we still have 4 minutes till 10:30. So
Nah, I mean, it's
let's keep
pretty.
it. Let's keep on 4 minutes. Come on, 4 minutes.
So, how about this? When do you think? Hmm, when do you think there will be free elections in Cuba?
When would I, man? To be honest with you, I don't know, but I'll say I think, to be honest with you, when Raul Castro finally steps down and his family's out of the way, I feel that that moment will inspire or create a type of process to elect a new leader.
Hmm.
So I feel like after 2018, after he steps down and everything, I feel like that's the beginning of that process. And I'm trying to be hopeful here. I'm trying to be optimistic as well. I really feel that deep down inside. I feel like if he really stays his word, steps down, and the U.S. is still in connection with Cuba and they're mending relationships and everything, I feel like that will become a change then.
Huh. I don't know. I'm still very on the fence about this. I don't know. I mean, I could tell in the faces of the Cuban people when Obama came, it was like some hope for them. You know,
Yeah,
but we need to. The biggest issue is to get rid of the Cuban Communist government.
of course.
That's the thing. You can't, like, I'm gonna tell you right now, people are still gonna be tortured and they're gonna be in prison and some of them are probably gonna be killed until the Cuban government, which is the communist government, is eliminated. Until then, we're not winning. We're losing. Okay.
Let me tell you something. be- Before I was saying, before you had cut me off earlier, but
Yeah.
when I was in Syria, before I left, I sensed that the people were up to here already. They were fed up with the minimum wage of what $1 or what was it? What was it? Was what 20? It was like what 2 Syrian pounds an hour. It was like almost cheap labor, and I could sense that there was a level that they were getting fed up with. And look what happened in Syria. They got fed up with it. Revolution in Libya. They got fed up with it. They took down the person. In Egypt, they got fed up with it. They tried to overthrow and they took him out too. Like once people get to a certain level and they're just tired of it, that's it. And I feel like the Cuban people are going to get to that level if they haven't done so already, and that's going to spark.
Yeah, the
a
same thing
sense-
happened to the American Revolution when people, when Britain was ruling America, and people were just pissed off because there was no representation for taxation.
Yeah.
People were like, "Why am I getting charged all these taxes? I don't have no representation in government in the United Kingdom or British or whatever they call it. They gave me no representation." People could not say, "Hey, can you just please lower taxes? You know, if the British government gave them representation in government, they will lower taxes. But see, here's the thing: there is a Cuban assembly, and there is representation, but the representation is mostly a majority of the Communist Party. And we need to, until we eliminate that Communist Party, it's still going to be a communist country.
And I really think our next discussion should be on North Korea.
Oh yeah, we'll get there. But oh, and another thing before we go, I just want to say, rest in peace to the victims that passed away today with the Belgium terrorist attacks. It's very sad to see that. My heart goes out to those to the ones that are injured and that passed away today. Um, I believe that this country will, and the whole world will grow from this and become stronger. Um, but until then, we also there's another enemy in the front, and that's ISIS. And until they are eliminated, they're the potential enemy that we need to fight. And
Right?
I hope as a world we grow stronger and we continue to work together to eliminate this threat.
It's very sad. Like I remember waking up this morning and saw the news and seeing the people of Belgium just have to suffer through that, just trying to do their daily routine, do their daily lives, just being murdered like that in the streets in their own city. And just like in France previously, it's just so sad. It's just so disheartening. It hurts me
Yeah.
deeply to see innocent people being victimized, being targeted for let's clarify, radical ideology of these individuals who take things to the very extreme, who are brainwashed into doing these horrendous acts. And hopefully we can have a discussion one day. I can share you first-hand experiences I had overseas, going, over there and learning about religion, talking to people, my experience. Hopefully we have a dialogue about that soon. That'd be great. But again, like my colleague Alec and I said, my condolences go to all those in Belgium and in France as well, in the previous, and those who lost their lives in their family. And I hope, that God blesses them and that, they come together this time and we all unite. And like you said, my colleague, to fight against this threat, this ideology, that's the thing. This is an ideology that's poisoning people. It's radicalness, and that's what we have to watch out for. But hopefully, they pull through this and they catch that individuals who are doing these crazy things and these awful things.
Well, I'm gonna stop you there. It's 10:30. I want to say thank you to all our viewers out there for tuning into our broadcast. Maybe some of you already left, maybe because it's gotten too late, but thank you for listening to our conversation, our opinions on Cuba and the communist government and how Obama's trip has really influenced us to start this stream and talk about it. I want to say thank you to my colleague Ahmed, uh,
Yeah.
taking his time out of his day, working in medical school. I know it's tough out there. And I thank you for my viewers out there and our viewers, I want to say. Hopefully next week we can have another discussion about this. Until then,
I'm
thank you, people of the world.